Today's session should be short, but that's kind of the irony of it is what we've always noticed is real estate agents absolutely love to overeducate themselves and as a result almost intimidate themselves out of progressing forward. So my philosophy is to master the few things that will move the needle and then learn through experience. Now, that does not mean, and I need to start with this, that does not mean that you go forward reckless or that you don't learn the forms as they pop up. But what I'm saying is let's identify the bare minimum that you need today to actually move the needle forward. So, what we're calling this class is to be the contract minimalist. And here's kind of the key parts to it is navigating your first deals with some clarity and confidence. And in order to do that, having the right priorities in place. So we're going to go through what we would consider to be the problem and the solution. So number one is this is where we find most agents that even if you're not new, I want to define something first. If an agent has not done at least 3 deals, they are considered a new, like a brand new agent. And to be honest, if we're following some other coaching standards, until an agent has passed the $100,000 GCI mark, we consider them to be a newer agent. And it is only when you can consistently pass the $100,000 GCI. Now, by the way, let me make something clear here. GCI is your gross commission. That is before splits. That is before taxes. That is before fees. So to be honest, if somebody has their GCI is $100,000 and they're on an 80/20, well, really they've made $80,000. And then you take out some taxes. So really they've made, let's call it $65,000. And now they have their business expenses. So let's just take out another $10,000. So when an agent's GCI is $100,000, they're really taking home a little over $50,000. Now, that's not meant to, scare you or demean what you've accomplished. I'm just trying to bring us home. If you haven't done 3 deals, you're a brand new agent. If you've done under $100,000 in GCI, you're still a newer agent, okay? So this example here, you've passed the exam, you've earned your license, and now here comes the paperwork and the temptation. This is the temptation we see all the time. I fell into this trap as well, is you're inundated with honestly 20 to 30 new forms and new contracts. And I would say the fault of the brokerage or the industry is we present the forms as all being equal. And that could not be further from the truth. You end up with analysis paralysis because you look at this form, you look at this form, and you think you need to learn both of them at the same time and both with the same level of proficiency. So what we're going to do is we're trying to, dare I say, dumb it down a little bit. We have a learn as you go mindset, okay? And we're going to talk about how we decided what these forms are going to be. So number one is we looked at sorry, I'm trying to move my screen here. We looked at the focus on the frequency of the forms that are used. For example, if you're working with buyers, the number one form you need to know is the buyer forms, the BRBC and the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement. Now, if you're not in California, I apologize if you call it something different, but we have a buyer representation form and the purchase contract. If you're working with sellers, guess what? The listing agreement, right? You are going to use those forms by definition. You have to use those forms first and most frequently before you start dealing with other forms that are far secondary, okay? Trust that the context will teach you the rest. I do not think an agent needs to learn how to use a contingency removal form until it's time to remove the contingencies. And here's why. 2 reasons why. Number one is you're not going to see it until you're in an escrow. And number 2 is it's a relatively short form. I believe as at this recording, it's 1 page. So you have the RPA, which is nearing 20 pages, and then you have the notice to perform or the contingency removal. And these are 1 page. And then just understand that momentum is going to beat mastery, okay? So sorry, let me rephrase that. Beats the mastery of the obscure. What I mean by that, and sorry, what that is supposed to say is you opening 3 escrows is going to give you so much more momentum than you mastering 40 contracts word for word. Number one feels good, the other one doesn't. One gets you paid, and the other one does not. Okay. And here's the idea. This is the deeply rooted philosophy: is learn it when you need it. I hope you don't need to use a cancellation of contract, but when you do, that's when you'll learn how to use that form. And if you have a good coach, you can always ask that coach as well. Okay. Let's see, the big three. So we already kind of talked about this. So again, we're in California. So if you need to change the verbiage, I also would have changed the order of these two. But number one is, and again, just trying to be reasonable, you're going to need the BRBC first. You're going to need a buyer representation form first, before the RPA even, probably before the listing agreement, to be honest. You need to start working with the buyer before you can write an offer. And there's a good chance you're going to work with the buyer before you're going to work with the seller. So the BRBC, you should already know what this means. It means you are representing the buyer, you are defining the agency, and it does make you have the commission compensation conversation. RPA, this is, I mean, it's the cornerstone. This is how you actually get into an escrow. Even if you have a listing, it is no good unless there is a purchase contract that comes along soon after. And then, of course, we have the listing agreement, residential listing agreement. And here's the thing. I know this shocked me personally as a new agent. I expected, because the RPA is the first thing you look at, and it's like 20 pages, you just think to yourself, man, the listing is going to be so much bigger. And it's actually not. It's like a fifth of the pages, a fourth of the pages. But these are the big three. These are the ones. If you're going to learn a contract, when you learn a contract, make it these three: the BRBC, the RPA, and the RLA, the buyer representation, the purchase agreement, and the listing agreement. Now, master the core first. Every expert was once a beginner who chose depth over breadth. Your 3 key contracts are your launch pad. This is almost a permission for you to defend your time and your energy. You are going to be told that there's a 1031 exchange form, or there is a trust advisory, or there's a seller carry form, and that you need to learn that. You need to attend that class. I am giving you permission to skip on that class. Do not flood your brain with form after form after form. This is called, I wish I could credit it to the correct person. It's called lean learning. You are learning just enough to move the needle forward, and nothing more than that. It's a book, I believe, but I'm kind of butchering that, so I apologize for that. Forms you can learn later. And this is such a random compilation of forms that you can learn later. And here's the thing. These are not so random, and this is why I chose these. They're not so random that you'll never see them. For example, there's a seller carry form, a seller financing form that I don't know if I've ever seen anybody use, but somebody will try to teach a class and they'll tell you to go to that class. Do not go to that class. These are forms that you won't need right now. You can ignore them for right now. However, there's a good chance they will be following along into your first couple of escrows. Hopefully not too many of them, but a demand to close escrow. Okay. This is just, if something stalls, there is going to be a time where you need to say, hey, we need to close escrow, and here are the terms, and here's the penalty if you don't do it. Trust advisory. There's a good chance that when you are representing a buyer, they're not buying as a trust, but there's a pretty good chance when you're working with the seller that they own that in a trust. And by the way, buyers can buy it as a trust as well. Cancellation of contract, one I hope you do not need, but again, don't worry about it. If an agreement doesn't go well, then you can cross that bridge when you get there. And also not included in these, but are almost guaranteed to be used, contingency removals. Okay. Notice to performs, if you just kind of want to shove the timelines along, like, hey guys, let's get this going. And here's the trick. If you're ever caught needing a form and you haven't learned it yet, guess what? You can ask your broker, ask your coach, or here's a crazy concept, guys, read the form. None of these forms that I'm mentioning are 20 pages, right? I think it'd be unfair to tell somebody, hey, go read the RPA and learn it inside out. You could do that, sure, but that's a lot. You may need to go to some classes. But when it is a demand to close escrow or a notice to perform or a cancellation of contract, that's a 2-pager. You can read through that, okay? And then, of course, you can look it up, go to some trainings. So now here are the kind of the stages of learning, and this is kind of how we kind of call it the growth path here. Stage one is you master the big three. Master the RPA, sorry, let me say it in the correct order. The BRBC, the RPA, and the RLA. Now, the first transactions, you should be in a mentorship program, just so you know. I'm recording this in 2026. It may change in the future, but your first 3 transactions or handful of transactions, you're going to be working partnership with a mentor or a coach. I do that with our agents all the time. That is what's going to build your confidence. It's not learning the contracts before, it's being in the escrow and kind of seeing how it works. And then stage 3 is you kind of just start to naturally master the other forms over time. You may need a cancellation of contract on your 3rd escrow, and then you may not need it for another 10 escrows. Hopefully, that's only 2 times. Eventually, just know that you will start to learn, because another thing is you might start to see other people send it to you. You may need to see a notice to perform. You may need to send one, and you may need to receive one. So that's already twice the exposure to that form. Okay. And then the idea here is that the big 3, you're going to get a depth of knowledge. You're going to really dig in to the RPA, the BRBC, the RLA. And the other ones, you're going to just have a surface knowledge for a while. And here's again, I'm going to give you permission. Be okay with that surface knowledge. Be okay with becoming a master of these 3 forms and just letting father time and experience increase your depth of knowledge on these lesser used forms. Okay. And here's a great way to phrase this: as your deal count grows, so does your exposure. Advanced forms will reveal themselves naturally. And that's why I kind of use the example of a trust advisory. The more times you get listings, the more trust advisories you're probably going to need to use, because most sellers have their properties in a trust. I'd like to think so, anyways. And again, this is just to kind of give you some confidence here. Okay, you're going to have moments, and this is more of the mindset here. You're going to have moments where you just think to yourself, "What if this happens? Like, what if the seller dies, or what if the buyer cancels before the deposit is due? What if this? What if that?" Entertain those thoughts. Go ahead and let those thoughts go through. You can start to explore some of them, but do not let them distract you from getting your escrows closed and getting the momentum of these transactions. Okay. So here's just kind of another way to view this. So number one is, if you're at a good brokerage, you have a good coach, you're going to learn from them. Okay. Lean on those coaches, those instructors, those brokers. Also, view the deals as a great way to learn. And by the way, there are so many lessons I learned from transactions that I would not have experienced otherwise. I had a buyer that refused to hand over the inspection report to the seller. In California, it's built into the contract. You have to provide that. I would not have experienced that. I wouldn't have known that until maybe a year or 4 later when I encountered it again. But that deal, that was my first deal, by the way, it taught me that lesson. Amazing. And I never forgot it. And then trust your ability, guys. Fear of not knowing everything is normal. I think a lot of people, the mindset is the number one issue. They think to themselves, well, what if the seller asks, or what if the buyer asks? I have news for you. They're not going to. There is such a small percentage chance that they're going to stump you with a random off the wall question, which, by the way, if you don't have the answer to, I'll give you what the answer is. And I quote, "That's a great question. Let me get the answer for you and I'll get back to you soon." That's totally fine. And by the way, if you really want to dig in, you can get as really good and say, "Hey, look, I'm a professional. I'm good enough to know what I know, and I'm good enough to go find out when I don't have the answer." There you go. Write that down. Your first deal is confidence through competence. Start with the big three, learn as needed, and trust the process. I can't explain to you or express to you how often an agent, I can see it in their eyes. They do not trust that they will learn the forms. I was that person. I remember another agent said to me, "You'll learn it. Don't worry. You'll get it as you go." And I thought to myself, that's easy for you to say. You've already experienced it. I can tell you firsthand, you will learn as you go. Nobody told me which forms to focus on more than anything. And to be honest, nobody gave me permission to ignore certain forms, but I'm giving you permission to do so. Okay. Okay. So let me go to the very beginning. This was the contract minimalist. This is considered a white belt class because there's so many forms that are going to be thrown at you as a newer agent, but I'm giving you permission to focus on these. So let me know if you have any questions. Make a comment in the community if you have a key takeaway or a big aha, and we will see you on our next video.